Hello and welcome to episode 15 of The Second Messiah. In the last episode, the Italians snuck round Edgar's position in order to raid Neapolis, attacking with a huge fleet by sea. We had only a couple of boats who heroically were able to stop the enemy's general and defeat him, but the rest of his massive force was able to capture the town and sack it before sailing away. Edgar, hoping for some more action, sailed west to attack Carolis, a Western Roman Empire settlement on an island of the Mediterranean where he easily defeated the local garrison. Then Vithericus, also looking for war, declared war on the Garamantians to his west, a massive African kingdom who he'll now have to fight through with the help of his brother Geilamir. He rushed forward to besiege the capital of Livia, Ptolemais, whilst Geilamir had to make a dangerous walk through the desert, a walk that would cost many of his men's lives towards a Garamantian settlement. Saphrax, hoping to help out as well, deployed from Syracuse by sea to attack a port in the western part of the Garamantian Empire, and now is preparing to conduct a dangerous landing and assault. Well, Canopus needs to learn that people respect discipline. Ride back to him and tell him I give him no counsel, only orders. Orders that he must execute those involved in the plot and display their heads for all to see. And in general, that he must do as the rulers of this land have always done in order to maintain order. Now go. Brother wants me to lead the armies, but the people need leading just as much, even more perhaps. I am just as scared of what those I have left behind to continue my duties will do to us as I am of what the enemy plan. But on a personal note, it will be good to fight alongside my brother, God's chosen, in a campaign that will change the world for the better. The Messiah will conquer with me as his right hand. Our people in Italia will soon see the light and come to join us in a glorious march. Perhaps even Brother Edgar will return. Not that this would make our struggle any easier. Ragnar, ride to the rear and get the stragglers in order. There's still a long way to go, and the Messiah is waiting. In the seas just off the coast of Africa, Saphrax and his troops are prepared in a fleet to make a landing against the Garamantian stronghold. His ships are making their advance through a rainy day, which will help out because it will make fires hard to start, meaning any attempts by the enemy to burn the ships before they land will not succeed. The enemy had ships of their own, proper naval ships as well, but they did not choose to engage with my approaching ships. Instead, they landed the crews to fight on land. You can see they have other land troops arrayed at various landing points in the town, ready to receive my men. I need to split those men up to make sure that I can attack from multiple points at once. My strategy was to land part of my force further down the coast on the beach to prepare an assault from outside the town, basically making a regular siege assault. Seeing this, the enemy, luckily for me, pulled many of their troops to set up on a regular formation on the fields outside of the town, which is perfect because that means they're vacating the actual landings in the town itself. For my other forces, you can see I've still got most of my boats waiting offshore, and they can pounce and land on positions such as this, coming in behind where the enemy is now setting up their forces, destroying the tower on the way and inflicting a devastating rear attack if this all works. More and more enemy forces poured out. Eventually the enemy had a pretty decent looking formation out here, much of which was actually hidden to me at the time. So they've got skirmishers in front with spearmen on the left, and the right side of the formation is almost all cavalry. They've got loads of cavalry, including heavy cavalry who'll prove difficult to defeat. Just as the enemy finished setting up, I too finished setting up with my distractionary force. It's a long, thin line of spearmen with two squads of falxmen who are going to advance on both flanks, perhaps to inflict a shock upon the enemy once we lock the enemy in place, especially against their spear infantry who won't be able to resist their charge. The enemy slingers will start inflicting casualties on me from the get-go, but soon I will have closed to range. The enemy seem to countercharge with many of their units, which is actually a bad choice because it's taking them away from their tower, which was going to help them in this engagement. On my left, the enemy's cavalry make a pretty heavy charge against my spear unit, which also gets hit by enemy infantry at the same time and breaks up, and this spear unit is now under a lot of pressure, being attacked from all sides by that cavalry. Along the rest of the line, things are more normal. Our spears engaging with the enemy's spears, and on the far right my spears engage with the enemy's spears but with my falxmen in support, allowing me to quite easily break the enemy here on the beach and advance up that flank. But just at the same time the enemy broke on the other flank, they broke me, sorry. Their heavy cavalry destroyed my spearmen very quickly, leaving my falxmen now exposed to be attacked from all sides, an extremely bad situation. Luckily, my landings in the town are now taking place. I'm landing my powerful Gothic warband to come and attack the enemy from the rear. You can see the enemy had skirmish cav attempting to hold them off, but that's not going to help. The enemy's tower had been trying to set my boat on fire, but luckily the rainy day made it very difficult, so my troops were able to land successfully and can now begin capturing that tower. So the battle itself is slowly folding around as my right flank advances, the enemy's right flank advances, but my men are doing okay because the enemy's troops are inferior in quality to mine, so where the fight looks even, it's going to go my way eventually. You can see there, another breakthrough on the right flank means I can fold even further around the enemy's troops. My Gothic warband capturing the enemy's tower and taking extreme casualties from the tower fire, and are now very close to actually capturing it. With that taken down, the tower will stop firing towards the main battle and make it easier for me to fight there. So one squad has now rushed forward. I can use rapid advance to make these men rush even quicker into the battle. First they meet the enemy's general here commanding a small slinger unit. He is going to go down pretty much instantly as the Gothic warband come up behind them, and now they're free to come and engage with the rest of the enemies here. The enemy's cavalry is still a problem at this stage because my spearmen just seem unable to defeat them, and the enemy's spearmen are keeping me busy and stopping me from being able to surround the cav, especially the skirmish cav. But the fight is slowly going in my favour now. You can see I'm just gaining a numerical advantage, having finally defeated the enemy's low quality spearmen. And with the arrival of the Gothic warband, this is going to make life a lot easier. The first unit that arrives here quickly routs an enemy unit. These spearmen have no chance against the Gothic warband, who will just hack through them. The falxmen helping out as well, a very effective unit against these spears now that the enemy's momentum is totally lost. So we break through those infantry, many of the other infantry units in the area break as well, leaving just the skirmish cavalry. To deal with them, I'm moving up crossbow troops in the background there. My men are going to fall back out of range and the crossbows will take out the enemy. The enemy tried to countercharge me once they were out of ammunition. Luckily for me, they charged into my spear wall just waiting for them, so many of them were killed instantly, and once they're in close, javelins and crossbow bolts destroy the rest of them. So the enemy force has now been heavily depleted in this assault. The battle isn't over though, because they actually still have a unit that at the time of playing I couldn't see. It's that onager in the distance, so I knew I had to move into the town to attempt to find any other units that were hanging around. The onager had been walking across the battlefield the whole time and only now begins to fire, thus revealing its position to me. I sent a squad of archers to just go and run at it, because I knew that running at it would cause them to break, but unfortunately the shots they did fire were pinpoint accurate and did heavy damage to a unit of my spears formed up in a tight formation. Still, they actually routed even before my archers got anywhere near them, leading to a decisive victory. So he successfully captured this port, but we're right in the middle of enemy territory and now have to hold it.
My dear son, as you've doubtlessly already heard, as I hear word travels like wind through our Messiah's imperial court, by the grace of God's second son, I have been made ruler of Hadrumentum. I have ruled scarcely a day, but it takes no sharp eye to discover just how the previous masters of this city made their coin. Namely, by extracting it out of the skin and off of the backs of these Romans. The local lords forced them to labor in the fields in all manner of heat, letting only the lucky or the favored ones slave at kilns or power their silk-laden ships. Cruelty on this scale would make horse lords blush. But my boy, you should have seen their faces when we entered the city, heard the cheers as the masters were thrown in chains, and felt the water splash as Father Velkis baptized the whole town in the lake. I know I raised you on tales of Roman triumphs, but to see the look of hope in the populace, the pride, makes me think that we could be Romans again after all. Plus, having a few village girls to warm your bed on these cold desert nights might not be such a sin after all. But although I would never tell your mother, I even think they are starting to see Saphrax as a truer Roman than whichever boy the pretenders have placed on their crumbling throne. Still, with the men and I moving onward to the next village, the defenders here are few. I can only hope that our new subjects see the wisdom in dying for themselves in lieu of dying to their old masters. May the Father guide my mind, the Spirit my tongue, Christ the first my feet, and Saphrax the second my hands. With love, your father, Melchius.
So the settlement of Hadrumentum is ours and the Garamantian defenders are scattered, but we have no intelligence about the rest of this continent in this area, so we don't know if we'll face any counter-attacks. Our army was damaged in the assault, losing one full unit of Falxmen, and several of the spear squads were depleted as well. I can get a few of those men back by occupying the settlement. I of course have the option of just liberating it and running away, but I want to hold this outpost because Saphrax wants to get involved in this war and push on further from here. The town itself will need repairing. I'll need to repair the Latin religious building to convert it over to the Aryan version. The other buildings are okay for now to keep, so I'll just repair them up and probably won't convert them in the short term, although the military port probably won't be all that useful, so I may replace it with a trade port. So with the money spent on those repairs, Saphrax now waits inside the town. He'll be able to regenerate a few troops over the next end turn sequence, and once the town is repaired, it will have a garrison. You can see there is already an enemy stack right next to the town, so there's a pretty large risk of being attacked right away, which is the main issue right here. Now during the end turn sequence, I thought I'd show you a few of the things going on. You can see the Western Roman separatists are attacking the Caledonians up at the northern end of Attila, so the Romans are making a little bit of a comeback in Attila. It seems there's also Roman rebels in that province as well, who have the ability potentially to attack me even, but luckily they're very weak at this stage. Also going on is the Eastern Roman Empire's campaign in Asia Minor, where for pretty much the entire campaign they've been fighting against Pontus and Asia, and at this point are starting to gain an advantage over them. My allies who are liberated there initially took much of the Roman territory, but they're starting to lose it now as the Romans fight back. The Western Roman Empire too, although now exiled to Iberia and the western end of the map, seem to be attacking provinces in Africa too, so perhaps the Romans are making a comeback all across the board. Now the feared move by the Garamantians happens. It turns out they had loads of troops by the looks of it just in the fog of war away from the town of Hadrumentum, so they're able to make a massive attack, and according to the balance bar, Saphrax is severely overpowered by the enemy's forces. The garrison of the town is just a few men strong, so Saphrax really has to rely on his depleted army to face off with the multiple stacks. Two full armies, including loads of legionaries, one coming by sea, one by land, a naval force with the king of the enemy's kingdom, and a small group coming in from land as well that's really insignificant in comparison to the rest of the enemy's pretty powerful force, led by a 5-star general. So Saphrax is going to have to put up quite the fight to hold these men off, and of course this has a very good chance of being his last battle, but we're going to try. I set up in a conservative formation with many layers of defense, the first layer being just a few units on the outskirts of the town who are going to try and hold the enemy's advance out so the towers can attack them. The citizenry flee as the enemy advance, coming through these forests and immediately being attacked by my towers. Their main force all attacked one of the approaches to the town at once, which is good for me because my 2 units of spears will be able to hold them off. The enemy's second army, coming in by sea, is arriving onto the battlefield now, and I have a few ships of my own that I'm moving to intercept it. The best I can hope to do is distract it, because I only have about 20 crewmen between all of those ships. Cavalry coming in from the south who threaten another approach, but I've got spears ready to receive them, so that's okay. On the main approach, the enemy's cavalry have outflanked my spears already, but are struggling to fight with them and are being damaged by tower fire, so that's going okay. You can see I've got archers right behind the line supporting them as well. Unfortunately for me, as you can see in the background there, the enemy have split their forces up, so even though a good number of their forces came to attack my defended position there, some of them are going to flank around. And here, I initially had that entrance exposed, and I'm quickly moving up a spear unit to try and stop the enemy, but of course there's a handful of spearmen in a thin line that's going to struggle to hold this massive force of legionaries who are pushing into the town. The enemy takes some of my men down using their darts before they attack and then go into melee where my spear wall has to hold them. I'm moving up reinforcements to that position because there's an extreme chance the enemy will break through. At sea, my ships are trying to lead the enemy away from the town. You can see the direction I'm taking here, but the enemy aren't taking the bait. This artillery ship with only 2 crewmen on it is just going right through the middle of the enemy's fleet, the enemy completely ignoring them. So unfortunately my plan to bait them didn't work, but at least it means I can attack them if they're just going to ignore them. The enemy's cavalry attack coming from the south meets some of my spears here. 2 units of spears will be easily enough to hold off the enemy, and making it even easier for me is the fact that my tower just next to them will be able to fire at some of the enemy's cavalry, and once they're in range, they happen to be just out of line of sight there, so it wasn't firing. So back on the other side, the enemy's onslaught against the 2 units of spears holding at this tower is starting to take its toll on these men. They're going to gradually break through, and the unit on the left, which has been outflanked, is going to fall more quickly than the other. So soon, the advantage I'm gaining by having this tower firing at the enemy will go, but I want to keep it going as long as possible because that's actually killing quite a lot of the enemy. The enemy broke through my first unit on this other approach, but I've reinforced with some Gothic warbands who are now able to lock the enemy in place. The enemy's numerical superiority will enable them to win that battle, but at a cost. I've also moved up a second unit of spears to hold the enemy a little bit further back, so we're continuing to contain the enemy's advance here, really just containing them all across the town, but containment's not good enough because they've still got another army to land. We need to somehow make a dent in them. As for their leader, Saphrax, I want to give him some special treatment. When inside the town, try to capture him alive. Set out a dinner for him and I in the town square, and surround the table with the surrendered Goths and any Roman collaborators you can find. I wish to speak at length with the man who believed he could topple our strength single-handedly. Once I have deduced whether he is brave or foolish, I shall dismember him in front of his troops. That way, when they are my slaves, they will remember that even the best of them could not overcome me. And I want this all set up before I land, so do not show restraint this time. A chance to really damage the enemy fortunately presented itself thanks to the enemy commander, who decided to fight with his infantry trying to push through my spears, but he, being a cavalry unit, was challenged to get through. Although my spears probably aren't actually powerful enough to defeat his heavy cavalry unit, the tower right next to him certainly can, and you can see he's almost lost all of his guards, and him himself is right at the front in a very dangerous position. Seeing this, I knew that continuing that engagement would actually give me a chance to kill their rank 5 commander, which would have a devastating effect on their morale. In the southern part of town, the enemy's cavalry attack on my spear wall has been successfully fought off. One of the units hasn't broken, it's going to try and escape from that engagement. The enemy, though, being a raiding unit, have successfully set fire to a number of the buildings in the area, which is lowering my troops' morale and stats and endangers the tower from being destroyed by that fire. At this moment, the enemy's general is killed, fortunately enough for me, in this battle, especially because these men here are under enormous pressure, but the pressure is going to be relieved as the enemy start to turn and run, the tower still taking them out as they leave. This has made things a lot easier there, and on this approach on the northern part of town where enemy units start routing as well. Overall, the enemy's morale has been heavily shocked by this loss, and this is going to help immensely. Unfortunately for my ships out at sea, they've been boarded by the enemy's navy and only had 1 or 2 crew members, so those ships did not last very long. My artillery ship, though, is still going strong out to sea, where the enemy seem to be mostly just ignoring it, and I'm just sneaking up behind the enemy's fleet and hitting them with shots from the artillery piece. You can see I've heavily damaged one of their ships already, and the enemy aren't really reacting very well to it, if at all, which is useful for me. So now you can see the 2 main fights are becoming quite even because the enemy's lost a lot of their troops to routing, so my few surviving soldiers are now able to hold okay against the enemy. The cavalry who were fighting on the south part of town have come round to flank attack these spearmen here. My spearmen are on the verge of defeat, but valiantly holding on and allowing the tower to kill the enemy's heavy cavalry there, which is crucial. Again here, my spearmen are getting totally surrounded by the enemy's forces, the tower helping out a little bit, but it's going to get even worse because the enemy are now starting to land their second army. I've still got reserves, and I'm preparing those reserves to receive the enemy, blocking off the route up to the capture point from the area where they're landing, and there's plenty more coming in. You can see though that my artillery ship successfully gets a hit on this damaged enemy transport and sinks it, destroying a whole unit of their spearmen at once. A fantastic move from my artillery ship, especially considering it only has 2 crew members, valiantly just sitting there firing the artillery piece while all of the enemy ships around it just seem to pretend it's not there. It's almost as if they haven't even noticed I'm doing this. So all of the enemy's troops landed here have the opportunity to rush up this small hill and start attacking my central position. Luckily, they seem to be indecisive, and while they sit around reforming, the men on the hill are throwing javelins down, doing a lot of damage to this leading unit here. Now they're going to dilly-dally here for quite a long time, waiting for more reinforcements to land, I presume, so the enemy didn't exploit the fact that they could rear attack me at all in this area. Not that they actually needed to, because as you can see, my unit routes just as the enemy does, both sides quitting the engagement. My side routed because it was raining arrows, enemy arrows, taking my forces out, so even as we defeated the enemy, my troops were pushed away as well, leaving a huge pile of bodies and gore where the fight took place. But at least we've actually stopped the enemy's momentum dead there. At the other fighting point, the enemy have successfully captured it now, having wiped out the defenders, and their archers are now coming in to capture that tower and to start firing arrows at the next point I'm defending. I've moved troops from further inside the town to block off more areas, and here I've got skirmishers on a barricade blocking their direct entry to the rear part of my other defensive position looking out to sea. So overall a pretty strong combination of defensive positions, but of course the enemy still has an absolute advantage in terms of power. I successfully sunk another enemy ship using my artillery ship, but unfortunately the enemy at this point noticed what was going on and started directing some of their own ships to engage it. They essentially tried to board with it, but for some reason they found it extraordinarily difficult to board and tended to just ram it. For some reason the ram wasn't really doing any damage to the ship. So my two brave crew members are able to continue loading and firing the piece at anything that happens to come into their line of sight, whilst being boxed in by the enemy's ships all around them. My onagers now are going to start firing at the enemy who are trying to capture the tower down on the lower part by the docks. I have been withholding the onager for the entire battle so far, wanting to use its very limited ammunition only when I most needed it, and I decided it was now time to start burning up the enemy units as they landed and perhaps even destroying their ships. I'm also rushing out all of my guys who are out of ammunition, my skirmishing forces, to try and drive the enemy's archers away, because the pressure from the arrows they were putting on my men was too high. We're really starting to take casualties. They're still indecisive about this approach up the hill towards my Gothic warband. They can successfully be indecisive though, because they have bowmen supporting them, so if they don't attack they can just rain arrows upon that position and make it easier for them to attack. So in some ways they are actually doing the right thing. For the artillery ship, things are looking bad. The enemy bombarding it with fire arrows, multiple ships trying to board it. It's still managing to fire off against the enemy though, a completely valiant effort from the two remaining crewmen on this lonely ship. Oh well, they were sure to work out this ship was indeed crewed eventually, no matter how long we hid and pretended to be adrift. Not the most perceptive of folks, losing two ships before they wonder where the huge balls of burning rock are coming from, but they twigged in the end. Well, my lad, it's been a pleasure. I dare say they won't let us get away from this now. At least we can be proud that we've saved hundreds of lives on the shore, no doubt about that. My son is back there, you know. Either he's still alive thanks to our efforts, or we're too late and I shall be dining with him and telling our little tale quite soon. Such a beautiful sky and calm sea to sail on too. We're spoiled. The ship miraculously remains mostly undamaged by the enemy's ramming. Even their fire attack is taking a long time to catch light, although the ship is now smoking perilously, as you can see. Back on land, the enemy are finally making their attack against my new defensive position. My Gothic warband are engaging the enemy in melee. I've got an advantage against the enemy's spears, not so much against the enemy's legionaries, because my men have already been weakened by missile fire, so their low health is even lower than usual. The enemy will actually be able to kill them relatively easily. I've moved up some slingers. They've got a few bits of ammunition left in order to hit the enemy's corners. They can just about see bits of the enemy formation from where they are and start taking out a few enemies. You can see these legionaries on the edge of the warband's formation are going to be cut down by close-range slinger fire, which is quite useful. I successfully caught up with the enemy's archers out on the other side of town, but unfortunately their archers are actually better than my skirmishing forces in melee, so although I managed to engage them and stop them from firing, they're actually going to defeat my unit and then will be able, of course, to continue firing. So that didn't go quite as planned. You can see in the centre of town I've still got a defensive position after the one I'm manning currently, so even though I'm losing the battle as it seems, all hope is not lost. The enemy are moving a cavalry unit and a tiny unit of spearmen to attack another approach which I was mostly not defending. I decided to send the city's garrison to defend this position. It's basically 10 Legio Comitatenses who form up in a line at the top of this hill, ready to receive those spears and cavalry should they make their attack. They'll have darts that they can throw down at the enemy spearmen, but the units are so small and there's going to be so few darts, I don't think they're going to be actually doing any damage. My artillery ship has somehow escaped from where it was surrounded by all the enemy's ships, but these ramming boats seem to stop it in its tracks. They're not going to let it get away, and more importantly not let it turn to face its artillery piece at damaged ships to give a chance of sinking them. And making matters worse, 2 enemy artillery ships have just joined the battle. They of course can simply destroy my ship from a distance and then go on to attack land targets, which is going to be highly dangerous. The enemy are landing yet more forces. They're just about now finishing deploying all of their army on land here. Some of them have been used to go around and destroy towers, but most are now making an attack up this hill where you can see they've done a lot of damage to my defenders. We've done damage to them as well, but their numerical superiority allows them to confidently just continue sending in fresh units. My Gothic warband will not last much longer, and we're almost out of ammo for the hurlers supporting them from behind. Although now there's a nice big enemy target for these hurlers to throw at, these spearmen are going to take a lot of stones and the risk of friendly fire is quite minimal, so you can see we actually cut down the enemy as they're locked in melee. But my warband breaks as well, so the enemy will now be free to rush up there. I've got some Falksmen defending the position, but they are one of the worst defensive units in the game, so that's not going to help out too much. The enemy's heavy cavalry charged up the hill towards my tiny formation of Legio Comitatenses, and I guess predictably they were unable to stop them. They were simply ripped apart by the enemy's heavy cavalry. Wasn't the end of the world though, because simply locking them in position here is useful, because I have crossbowmen nearby who'll be able to fire into the enemy's cav. My onager is trying to damage the enemy's heavy infantry before they engage me. The enemy all have low morale because of the loss of their general, so damaging them a bit before they come into melee might mean that even fighting a battle where I'm losing, I'll be able to rout them. Things aren't looking good for my artillery ship though. They're finally destroyed when the enemy's artillery pieces crack the hull open and the ship sinks. One crew member jumps to attempt to swim away, but the commander would rather go down with his ship and not be seen for showing any fear to our enemies. So we're in a little bit of trouble here, and the enemy are about to make a final attack against Saphrax's position. We'll see if he holds on in the next episode. Death engagement while Vithericus and Geilamir finally meet their targets in the Garamantian East next time on the Second Messiah.